It was supposed to be the best night of their lives, the night they'd been waiting for since freshman year. On June 10th, 2018, the senior class of Lincoln High School gathered in the gym for their graduation ceremony. The school sat on the edge of a small Michigan town, the kind of place where everyone knew everyone and secrets rarely stayed hidden. The ceremony went as expected. Speeches, loud cheers, the tossing of caps into the air. Parents cried, friends hugged, teachers smiled with relief. But for 20 students, the real celebration wasn't the formal one. That group had planned something different, something they thought would be unforgettable. A senior lock-in held inside the school after dark. No teachers, no roles, no parents. Just a night of games, movies, junk food, and the thrill of exploring the school they were finally leaving behind. It had become a bit of a tradition, though unofficial. Past seniors had done it too, always bragging about how fun and wild it was to roam the halls after hours. To make the building their own one last time, Evan was one of those 20 students. He didn't really want to go at first. He wasn't much of a party guy, quiet, smart, always keeping to himself. He wasn't awkward, just not into the loud stuff. He'd rather be at home with his laptop. But his best friend Tyler convinced him. Come on, man. It's our last night together as high schoolers. You'll regret it if you don't. Tyler had said, grinning as he tossed a duffel bag into Evan's car. The truth was, Evan had a small reason of his own for going Madison. She was funny, confident, and way out of his league, but she'd always been kind to him. She was going to be at the lock-in, and that was enough to push Evan to say yes. They arrived just after sunset. The building looked different at night. The big parking lot was mostly empty except for a few cars. The front entrance, usually locked, by 5 p.m. had been propped open with a folding chair. Inside, the school felt both familiar and strange. The walls, covered in old posters and class photos, looked more faded in the dim hallway lights. The buzz of the fluorescent bulbs echoed, just a little too loudly. But no one cared. The students set up in the gym, dragging out sleeping bags and bean bags, plugging in speakers and unpacking snacks. Someone brought a projector and hooked it up to the wall. Laughter bounced off the walls as kids played hide-and-seek dared each other to run into the dark hallways and filmed TikToks in classrooms that felt like caves after hours. At first, everything was normal. It was fun. For a while, Evan relaxed. He watched Madison do impressions of teachers that had everyone in stitches. Tyler got into an argument over Mario Kart in the corner. People were lounging around, texting friends who couldn't make it, and sneaking sips from bottles hidden in backpacks. But as midnight came and went, Evan began to feel something he couldn't quite explain. It started as a dull feeling in the back of his mind, like being watched. The gym, once full of chatter, seemed a little too quiet now. When he stepped into the hallway to get some air, he noticed how cold it had gotten. The AC wasn't supposed to be on, and the vents weren't blowing. Yet the air had this stillness, like the kind you feel when something's waiting to happen. He told himself it was just his nerves, maybe too much soda, maybe not enough sleep. He shook it off and wandered toward the trophy case by the front office. That's when he first felt it, an itch along his spine. The kind of feeling you get when someone's behind you, but when he turned around, the hallway was empty, completely empty. No sound, no footsteps, not even the buzz of the lights. Just him and the long stretch of dark tile. He hurried back to the gym. Back inside, someone had put on a horror movie, one of those predictable slasher flicks, but Evan couldn't focus. He kept glancing toward the gym doors, half expecting someone, or something, to be standing there. But every time he looked, it was just the hallway again, quiet, still. He tried to tell Tyler about it, but Tyler laughed it off. Dude, it's just the vibe. Schools at night are creepy. That's the point. It's part of the fun. Evan forced a smile. Maybe Tyler was right. Maybe he was just overthinking. He sat down next to Madison and tried to laugh along with the group, but the feeling didn't go away. It sat in his stomach like a stone. Every time someone left the gym to go to the bathroom or sneak off into the halls, Evan watched them leave, unsure if they'd come back the same, or at all. It was only the beginning of the night, and something deep inside Evan whispered that whatever was really going on in that building hadn't even started yet, by the time the clock struck 2 a.m., most of the group had split off into smaller clusters. Some kids were still watching movies in the gym, others were napping in sleeping bags, and a few had wandered off to explore the school in pairs or trios. Evan sat near the back bleachers, feeling restless. The eerie feeling from earlier hadn't left him. In fact, it had only gotten worse. It was like the air itself had changed, heavier, colder, and hard to breathe in certain places. Everything felt just a little off, like a dream where the walls don't line up quite right. That's when Madison slid down beside him, a playful smile tugging at her lips. "Want to check out the second floor?" she asked in a low voice. "I heard they're renovating it, and there's some creepy art stuff left behind. It could be fun." Evan hesitated. He remembered the second floor being blocked off. All semester teachers always said it was under construction, but no one ever saw workers coming in or out. Still, this was the chance he'd been waiting for. Madison asking him to hang out? He nodded before he could think twice. They slipped out of the gym together, careful not to attract attention. As they climbed the stairs, the sounds of the lock-in faded behind them, muffled laughter, the low rumble of movie dialogue, the occasional buzz of someone's phone. When they reached the top, the change in atmosphere was immediate. The second floor was darker, quieter, and somehow colder. The overhead lights were dim, and some flickered weakly, casting long, unsteady shadows down the corridor. The hallway stretched out ahead of them, lined with rows of old blue lockers. A few looked like they had been slammed or kicked indented and warped in unnatural shapes. One door at the far end hung slightly open, moving just a little with each creak of the floor. Madison pulled out her phone and turned on the flashlight. The beam cut through the dark, bouncing off the dust in the air. "Creepy," she whispered with a nervous laugh, stepping forward. Evan stayed close behind her. As they passed one of the old classrooms, the art room, they noticed something etched into the glass window of the door. Madison leaned closer and shone her light across it. The words were scratched deep into the surface. "Don't stay past 3 o'clock." They both froze. "Do you think that's, like, a joke?" Madison asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Evan didn't answer. His mouth had gone dry. There was something about the way the letters were carved, not like a prank, but frantic, desperate. The grooves were uneven and jagged, like someone had done it quickly, maybe even in fear. Suddenly, a loud slam echoed from down the hall. They both jumped and turned toward the sound, but there was nothing there, just darkness. Madison's hand shot out and grabbed Evan's arm. "We should go," she said. But when they turned around, something had changed. The hallway behind them wasn't how they left it. The lights flickered harder now, almost as if reacting to their movement. One locker door about 10 feet away was wide open. Evan stared at it, his heartbeat thudding in his ears. He was almost certain it had been shut when they first walked in. Slowly, cautiously, he stepped forward and looked inside. There was a graduation cap resting on the shelf inside. Not just any cap, it was black, with faded red stitching around the edges. The same style their class wore that night. But this one looked old, maybe 20 years or more. It was covered in a fine layer of dust and something else, a dark reddish stain on the edge. Next to it, propped against the locker wall, was a Polaroid photo. Evan picked it up. The photo was slightly curled and discolored, but the image was still visible. It showed a group of students, maybe 10 of them, standing in the same hallway they were in now. The picture was blurry, like someone had moved while it was taken, but one detail made Evan's stomach twist. One of the students in the photo looked exactly like him. Same eyes, same haircut, even the same blank expression he'd had just moments ago. Madison looked over his shoulder and gasped. That can't be you, right? I don't know, Evan said, barely able to get the words out. His voice sounded distant to his own ears. They dropped the photo and stepped back. The hallway seemed to stretch longer now, like the walls were subtly shifting. It felt like they were being pulled deeper into something that didn't want them to leave. Madison clutched his arm tightly. Let's get back downstairs. They didn't run, but they didn't walk either. They moved fast, not talking, not looking at anything else. And yet, Evan couldn't shake the feeling that someone or something was watching them from behind. He didn't dare turn around. When they finally reached the bottom of the stairs, the familiar sounds of the lock-in washed over them again, like stepping out of water. But Evan felt no relief. Because something was wrong now, something had changed. And whatever was up on that second floor hadn't finished with them yet. The moment Evan and Madison stepped back into the main floor, things felt off. The building still looked the same, dim lights glowing overhead, snack wrappers scattered on the floor, echoes of laughter and muffled music coming from the cafeteria, but it was like the atmosphere had shifted. It felt heavier, thicker. Evan's skin prickled, and he could see the unease in Madison's face too, though she tried to hide it. He glanced around for Tyler. Maybe if they found him, things would feel more normal. Tyler always had a way of brushing things off, making people laugh, acting like nothing could ever go seriously wrong. But when Evan asked around, nobody seemed to know where Tyler had gone. Pretty sure I saw him like an hour ago. One girl mumbled through a yawn. Maybe he went outside or something. Evan felt a chill crawl down his back. Tyler wouldn't have just left without saying anything. He was loud, always announcing when he went somewhere, even if it was just the bathroom. Madison tugged at Evan's sleeve and pointed across the room toward the auditorium. That door, she said. Evan turned and saw what she meant. Behind. The stage, just barely visible through the shadows, was a metal door they didn't remember seeing before. It was partly open, and above it glowed a faint green exit sign. But the light flickered strangely, as if struggling to stay lit. I've walked through here 100 times, Evan whispered. That door's never been there. Without saying another word, they crossed the room. As they got closer, the air changed again, cooler, like stepping into a freezer. Madison hesitated, but Evan stepped through first. On the other side was a narrow stairwell leading down. Much farther down than should have been possible. The school wasn't supposed to have a basement. At least, no one had ever mentioned one. Each step creaked beneath their feet as they descended. The deeper they went, the darker it got, until all they had was Madison's phone flashlight cutting through the shadows. The walls were made of old concrete, stained and cracked, and water dripped from unseen pipes, echoing through the silence. It smelled like rust and mold. The bottom of the stairs opened into a wide, open room with no windows and no clear exits. The space was strange, like it had been used for storage but had long since been abandoned. Desks were stacked in the corners like barricades. Broken filing cabinets leaned against the walls. But the thing that caught their attention immediately was the wall of mirrors on the far side of the room. Floor-to-ceiling mirrors, perfectly clean, reflecting the two of them with eerie clarity. In front of the mirrors stood a single old-fashioned TV cart, the kind teachers used in the early 2000s. The TV screen was on, but nothing was plugged into it. Static flickered across the screen, hissing softly in the otherwise silent room. As they moved closer, the TV screen suddenly shifted, static cleared into a grainy black and white image. It showed the school gym from what looked like many years ago. Students were lined up in graduation gowns, smiling and waving at a camcorder. The image was jumpy, low quality, but still clear enough to see the faces. Evan gasped. There, near the back of the line, was Tyler, but something was wrong. Tyler looked off, his smile frozen, eyes unfocused. His skin was pale, almost gray, and his body posture was too straight, like he was standing stiffly or being held up. Behind him stood a tall figure, partially obscured in shadows. It didn't move, but even through the low resolution, Evan could tell it wasn't right. Its proportions were off. Too thin. Too tall. No visible face. Madison covered her mouth. "That's not possible," she whispered. "That can't be him." The screen flickered again, zooming closer to Tyler's face. His mouth started to move, like he was trying to speak, but no sound came through. His eyes were wide now, filled with panic. Then, suddenly, the screen went black and a deep, distorted voice came through the TV speaker. It sounded like metal scraping on metal, slow and painful. "One must stay. One must take their place." Madison screamed and stumbled back. Evan felt paralyzed, his feet glued to the ground. The lights above them began to buzz violently, and in the mirrors, they saw movement behind their reflections, shadows twisting, something tall and slow moving just beyond the edge of the glass. That broke the spell. Madison grabbed Evan's arm and yanked him toward the stairwell. They ran, taking the stairs two at a time, the sound of their own breath drowning out the faint noise of dragging footsteps behind them. Not running, just following. When they reached the top and slammed the door shut behind them, they were back in the auditorium. Everything looked normal again. The lights, the decorations, the sleeping bags, even the smell of popcorn. Like nothing had happened. But Tyler was still gone. No one could find him. The police were called. They searched the entire school that morning, top to bottom. No basement, no staircase, no TV, nothing in the mirrors. No evidence the door had ever been there, but Evan and Madison both knew the truth. Something was beneath the school. Something that didn't belong in this world, and whatever it was, it had taken Tyler. Graduation ended in confusion. When the sun came up and the parents started arriving to pick up their kids, the school was already crawling with officers. The senior lock-in was supposed to be a fun, harmless send-off, but now one of the students was missing, and no one had a clue where he'd gone. Tyler's things were still in the gym. His hoodie, his backpack, even his phone, sitting face down on the bleachers with a cracked screen. It looked like he had just stepped away for a second and never came back. Evan and Madison didn't say much. They sat side by side on the curb outside the school, staring at the asphalt, replaying every moment from the night before. They didn't tell the police about the door and the auditorium, or the staircase, or the TV screen showing Tyler's face. In grainy black and white. Who would believe that? There was no proof. When they snuck back to the stage later that morning, the door was gone. The wall was solid brick. Just like it had always been or was supposed to have been. Evan felt like he was losing his mind. His parents didn't understand, no one did. People whispered that maybe Tyler had run away. Maybe he was hiding out, playing some kind of stupid prank. But Evan knew better. He could still hear that voice from the television, deep and broken, like it came from inside the walls. One must stay. One must take their place. The school canceled classes for the rest of the week. Graduation parties were postponed. Parents were furious, scared, and grieving in different ways. But Evan kept having the same nightmare over and over, wandering. The second floor alone, seeing that Polaroid in the locker again, Only this time it was Madison in the photo, not him. Sometimes he woke up gasping, heart racing, convinced something was standing in his room just out of view. A few nights later, Madison texted him at 2:14 am, "Can't sleep. I keep hearing things. Meet me at the school?" It was a horrible idea, and Evan knew it. But something told him if they didn't go back, if they didn't try to find Tyler, none of this would ever stop. They parked across the street and waited for the town to fall silent. The school stood in the dark like a giant tombstone. Not even the emergency lights were on. They broke in through a side door near the cafeteria, one that Tyler had shown Evan years ago. The lock had never worked right. Inside, the silence was suffocating. This time, they brought flashlights and phones. They checked the auditorium first, still just a wall. But as they stood on the stage, the sound came back, the same faint buzz, like an old television turning on somewhere deep underground. And then the door appeared, just like before. No hinges, no knob. Just open. Waiting. Neither of them spoke. They just looked at each other and stepped inside. The stairs stretched longer, this time descending farther into the dark. The concrete felt colder, the air heavier. Evan thought he could hear whispering in the walls, but he couldn't make out any words. When they reached the bottom, the room was different. This time, it wasn't full of desks. It was empty. Just a mirror, only one. Madison raised her phone to shine light across it. Their reflection stared back, but something was wrong. Evan looked closer, confused. The mirror showed them as they were, except behind Madison. In the reflection stood Tyler, pale, expressionless. His mouth opened, but his eyes didn't move. Then the lights above flickered violently, and for just a second, the reflection switched. Now, Madison was gone. In her place stood the same tall figure from the TV, just over Evan's shoulder, its shape barely human. No eyes, no mouth. Just long, thin limbs and skin that looked like stretched shadow. Evan spun around, but nothing was there. He turned back. Madison was staring at her reflection. Her eyes were wide, but she didn't speak. The mirror had gone dark. All that was left was their own pale reflections, except they weren't moving anymore. Not in sync. Her reflection raised its hand slowly. Madison didn't. Evan grabbed her arm. "We need to leave, now." But she didn't move. Her breathing was shallow. Her mouth opened like she was about to say something, but instead she just whispered, "It wants me." Evan panicked. He pulled her hard away from the mirror. The whole room began to shake, like the floor was groaning beneath them. The mirror cracked. A loud shriek, not human, echoed from somewhere deep in the concrete. They ran. The stairs felt longer going up, like they were running against gravity. But finally, the door came into view. Evan shoved it open, and they fell back into the auditorium. Gasping for air, the door vanished behind them again. But Madison was different. She wouldn't talk about what happened after that night. Her eyes never looked quite right again, always distant, glazed over like something was watching through her. She stopped responding to texts. She deleted her social media. A month later, her parents said she left for college, early moved away, no goodbye. Evan never saw her again. The school was shut down for renovations that summer. But the locals know better. Sometimes, if you walk past the auditorium at night and press your ear against the wall, they say you can still hear it. The buzzing, and sometimes the voice. One must stay. One must take their place.